Hi everyone and welcome to another video. I'm Norrell and today we are going to do a mix of the mid-year book freakout tag and the check-in tag. Both have overlapping questions and questions that I find interesting in both tags, and then there are some questions that I didn't find interesting or that don't really preclude to me, so I kind of took them out because otherwise I'm just sitting here saying, oh well, I don't have one of those. So you'll see the complete list of questions below and like what tag they belong to and the original creators. But there are quite some questions, so let's dive into it. The first one is how many books you've read so far this year, and for me I've just had a check and that is 33 books, and I expect that by the end of the month I'll be at 36. It's lower than it used to be. And more importantly, it's lower than what it should be in my head. In my head, I read about 80 books a year, so this is lower. And it's not a problem because I want to take my time with books and read bigger books, so this number shows that I've been doing that, I think, and my feeling also says that. But it does also show me that in my head, I should adapt the amount of books I read per month. Apparently that's 6, and that's fine. I don't care about what number it is, I just want me not to expect it to be higher or be disappointed because it's not what I expect it to be. So this has made me think about that, which is a good thing. Next question is also something that usually the next question is what genre you've read of more, and that is fantasy. I don't mind that it's fantasy, but I do. My audiobook reading hasn't been great. I talked about it in a previous video. I've kind of been struggling to pay attention to the books that I've been reading, but fantasy has worked very well because there's enough plot and the characters are good enough. So I've read the whole of the Lord of the Rings, I'm reading the Farseer Trilogy, I've been dipping my toes into N.K. Jemisin, and I like it. I like fantasy. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but in my head I read a lot of historical fiction and literary fiction, and I realized once I saw that it was fantasy, I was kind of disappointed because it's not elevated enough, which is nonsense. But it's made me realize that I have this stigma attached to fantasy in my head, which I don't want to be there. And it's fine that I'm reading a lot of fantasy. I'm enjoying my fantasy reading right now. But I am curious if at the end of the year it will have shifted again, if my audiobook reading has changed back to what it usually is. So we will see. Third question, best book so far. This was not, I knew what it was going to be. Let me see where it is, because I've got a lot of books in front of me. It's Bewilderment by Richard Powers. I love Richard Powers. We're going to get back to that later on. Absolutely love this book. It's a new top-tier favorite that in 5 years I will still think of this as a favorite book. It's about a father-son relationship. The son is neurodiverse and he's been struggling with how to take care of his emotions and behave in a way that is socially acceptable, which means that his father has to find ways to allow his son to be himself without drugging him, which is something that he finds very important. And at the same time, the son is really anxious about the climate crisis and what we're doing to sentient beings, to the animals and the plants that we are murdering off, basically. And it's about this, how are they going to deal with that, and how do you make this boy be okay with life if he's so angry all the time. Loved this. I'm going to show this book a couple of other times in the video as well. Next is the best sequel so far. So I've read a lot of first books of series, and there are actually only 2 sequels that I read, or 2 series. So one is The Lord of the Rings, but we're going to get to that in the next question, which, if you know the tag, will know is not great. But the best sequel, I would say, then is of the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb, which I've just been reading this month. It's fantasy that develops its characters very well, which I've been appreciating. I love that it takes its time. I mean, there's a lot happening, but it's not too heavy, and I've been loving to see how well the characters are developed, and I also loved that in the second book they are so much more developed than in the first one. So the first book is Assassin's Apprentice and the second one is The Royal Assassin, and I'm looking forward to reading the third book when I finish with the second one. Let's see, then we've got the most disappointing read so far, and that is kind of The Lord of the Rings. I had expected to love it more. I wasn't expecting all of the stuffy stuff about the history of Middle-earth. I wasn't interested in it. I felt like a history book more than world building in the way that I appreciate it. it, and I didn't like how little character development we got, and how little we actually got to see from the characters. I mean, for example, how Boromir and Aragorn, what we know from we know that they're all linked. Boromir is the son of the steward of Gondor. Aragorn is going to be the king of Gondor if he wants to reclaim his throne. There was so much potential for at least a little bit of uncomfortableness there. There's none of that. And that does not make sense to me. So I was disappointed in The Lord of the Rings. And I was also disappointed in another book that I DNF'd, and that's Un été Norvégien. Can't remember what the author is, and I've given the book away as well. But it's a book that had been sitting on my shelves for at least 2 years, and I loved the cover, and I was interested in it. I had expectations that were, I mean, not high, but at least I thought I was going to like it. And from the first page on, I thought, nope. I'm disappointed that it was sitting on my shelf for so long, seeing how much I disliked it, and at the same time, if I just opened the book and read maybe 2 pages in the bookshelf, then I would have already known. So kind of also disappointed in that. But I DNF'd it, so it's fine. Next question, most surprising read, which is also kind of painful because it is Florida by Lauren Groff, and I've lost the book. It was picked by my book club. I talked about it in my previous wrap-up. It's a short story collections, and those don't often work for me, so I wasn't super looking forward to it. And it's also about Florida, about people that live in Florida. Not super interested in that either, but I loved it. I loved all of the themes in it and how they were interwoven, and I really liked the writing. Really liked the book. There were so many passages also and sentences that were beautiful, but I lost the book probably on the train when I came back from book club evening, and now I don't have it anymore, and I had tabbed things, and makes me kind of sad. So we'll see if I get it again or not. But I was really surprised at how much I liked it, and it also made me appreciate once again how good a book club is, because they will make you read stuff that otherwise you wouldn't have, or not only that, but also force you to read stuff that initially thought, no, but I'm not going to like it, and then I did love it. So that is really, really good. Next question is new favorite author. So I looked at this in 2 ways, because to me a favorite author is one that you must have read at least 2 books by. And there are 2 authors that I previously read 1 book by that I really loved, and I've now read, in both cases, the second book that I also loved enough. So now these authors have kind of, in my head, I'm allowed to officially call them favorite authors. So we've got, and this is where we're going back to Bewilderment, because I had also previously read The Overstory by Richard Powers, so he's officially a favorite author. I know this is weird that my head works this way, but it is how my head works. So we've got Richard Powers, and I'm going to be looking at his backlist a little bit. And then we've also got one other, which is, let me see if I can find the first one that I read, Susanna Clarke. I'd previously read and loved Piranesi, and now I've also read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And while this one is not someone that I loved, I can say I love the writing style. So I suppose Susanna Clarke has also elevated herself to that list of favorite authors. But you can also see it as an author that you didn't know before, but you really like the writing style of and want to dive into more. And that then would have to be Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi, because I really loved her storytelling style, and I'm looking forward to reading Kintu whenever I find time. Which could be tomorrow, but which probably will not be. Yeah, love the writing style, and I know Kintu is going to be slightly different because it's a different setting, a different kind of book, but I trust Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi. I really like this one. So, yes, potential for new favorite author. Next question, book that made you cry. I don't cry at books, but there are definitely books that made me very sad, and they mostly have to do with the loneliness of the characters in there. So we've got the loneliness that Celie felt in The Color Purple, and how little she felt. That one made me feel stuff. So yeah, that one. And then we've got The Kite Runner, which I reread, and it's not necessarily the stuff that happens to Hassan that made me really feel stuff, but it's mostly how betrayed he must have felt by Amir. That dug deep. Also was that hit like a core thingy in me. How you're living through hell, and then someone that you thought was everything then pushes you aside and betray you, that's harsh. And another one where I felt the sadness also of the character is in The Ice Palace by Tadej Vesav. We've got a young girl who just made a very deep friendship, and then that other girl disappears, and how lonely she felt, and how she felt like she couldn't also communicate with the other people, although the other people around her were trying to communicate with her. That one also I felt stuff. Luckily, we've got the next question, and that is a book that made you happy. And also talked about this one previously, but there's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. There's so many funny things in this one. So many little tidbits and paragraphs, and not necessarily things that have to do with the plot, but they're just these little hilarious things, and I tabbed some of them. Let me just read the first one, because the first one is also on a different level, so I'll show you the humor. Love this humor. So, country gentlemen who read in their newspaper the speeches of this or that minister would mutter to themselves that he was certainly a clever fellow, but the country gentlemen were not made comfortable by this thought. The country gentleman had a strong suspicion that cleverness was somehow un-British. That sort of restless, unpredictable brilliance belonged to, most of all, to Britain's arch-enemy, the Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. The country gentleman could not approve it. Isn't that brilliant? Isn't that super funny? I was sharing all of these little funny things with the people around me who were not that interested, but yes, many funny things in Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Let's see, then we've got new release you haven't read yet but you want to. Elif Shafak's The Island of Missing Trees. It's recently come out. I mean, I feel like it's been talked about a lot because was shortlisted and a favorite, I would say, to the Women's Prize. I think I'm going to love this. We've got multi-generational, we've got historical fiction, we've got a country that I don't really know of and that I'm going to discover, and we've got a tree. Enough said, right? Most anticipated releases. Oh, that's one of the questions I should have taken out, but I don't look at those, so nothing to say about that. Next big priority. I want to make a free library. I've started it, and it's going to be a vlog as well, but I want to finish it, because then I'll finish the project. That would be great. I had made plans to really dive into Invisible Cities again, but unfortunately, so I made a list for like this month and the books I hadn't read for the previous month. I was going to get back into it, but then 2 of the 3 books I was going to have to read as an ebook on my mobile, and one of those books I'd started, I was loving it, but just realized how reading on my mobile phone ebook, it just doesn't work. And so much so that I wasn't appreciating that book because of that. So 2 of those books I'm going to have to, and therefore countries, I'm going to have to find something else. And one of the other books is still on its way to me. Well, no, 2 of those books are still on their way to me. So I was doing kind of well because I had plans, but then it's like there's this ladder, and I finally found the ladder, but the first thingy is too high. So yeah. Still trying to find a way to deal with that. Again, I also have to make sure that I can borrow ebooks from the library, because I'm going on holiday and I'm going to be only taking my e-reader probably with me, so I want to borrow some books from the library as an ebook. Is that a priority? Well, yes, because I've not been able to log into the online library thing, so I've got to make time for that. Books you need to read. So many. I mean, I could show you my whole TBR, but Moonwitch Spider King by Marlon James. Luckily have got plans to read this, and I've also really want to get to Revolutie by what's his face, David van Rijbroek. This is non-fiction about Indonesia, and Indonesia is going to be one of the countries of Invisible Cities sometime soon, so I want to read that one. But other books that I need to read, I've just got a book by the Slovenian author Drago Jančar or something. I'll show you a picture here, but I'm going to Slovenia on holiday, so I want to read a book from Slovenia. I also am going to go to Brazil at the end of the year, which is also luckily a Invisible Cities country, so I will be reading a book, one of those books. But yeah, so many books that I want to read. But let's prioritize these two first off, and this one hopefully, and so many more. Oh, I also need to read. Yes, I've already read Jane Austen this year, so that's good. And usually I also try to read a German book. So I've got one. So I've also, yeah, the German book, and I also try to read a Kazuo Ishiguro every year. So I should pick one still. So many things to do, so many things to look out for. Bookish Highlight. I really appreciated how much more I understood of Black Leopard Red Wolf. That's really, see, I've been making progress like digesting books, and this is one of the books that made me understand that and see how much I've grown. And similarly with La Fortune des Rougon by Émile Zola. This is a French classic, and I could have used this one also for the books that surprised you, because it's a French classic and I was expecting it to be quite stuffy, but I loved this. I loved also some of the threads and some of the themes, how they were developed. So yes, these two have made me appreciate how I've been growing as a reader. And there's another thing also, is that not that long ago there was a book publisher that contacted me to ask if I could read and review a book. Now that hasn't happened to me before, but so that was good. And that I was able to say no, that I was able to, like in my enthusiasm, realize that it wasn't going to work for me, because it was going to be about a book by Rodan Al-Glidi, it was by a English publisher, so they asked if I could read the English translation, but I could read the original Dutch, and I don't want to do that. So I'm glad that I was able to say no and not be like, a small child that got something new and then that definitely wants to wear it, although they don't actually like the thing when they think about it. So yes, that brings us to the end of these two tags. Let me know if you do the tag, because I'd love to watch it. Let me know if you have thoughts about any of these books or any of these questions. I'll see you in another video. Bye!
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.